Well, as is the case with most injury news, bad news for one is good news typically for another, and that is the case for the Indianapolis Colts, who are trying to sneak their way into the playoffs. We're going to cover all that and more, and specifically get into some of the nitty-gritty details of the Indianapolis Colts win over the New England Patriots. All that and more on this video. What's going on? It's Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And we're covering, again, bad news for one, good news for another, and that is that Trevor Lawrence is going to be out for the rest of the season. The Jags have already been eliminated from playoff contention, and so with his injury on Sunday, which was a really dirty hit as a concussion that he faced, they are taking air to caution, and they are going to they're going to keep him out for the rest of the year, which means the Colts are going to be facing Mac Jones, who they have a pretty good record against in this current when he was with the New England Patriots. And so that's again, bad news. I hate rooting for I'm never rooting for someone to get injured, but it is good news for the Colts, who are trying to sneak their way into the playoffs. That was already looking to be a very winnable game, and now it looks to be even more so, which is good. That's good for the Colts. The Colts now have almost a 17% chance to make the playoffs, which isn't great, but considering what this season has held for the Indianapolis Colts, that is actually, I would say, good, and it's definitely something that, this is the Colts may not win a Super Bowl. I don't think anyone's expecting that. But I think what the Colts are looking for is to make steps towards improvement. And while it may be another 9-8 season for the Indianapolis Colts, I do think that this year proves to be one that is a foundational year. Last year, obviously, you hoped that the Colts were going to build off of rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson. He goes down very early with injury. And then this year, go into the season, don't really sign anyone, but have a really good draft, and really hope that things are going to look up for the Indianapolis Colts. And yet, Anthony Richardson gets benched and gets injured at one point, gets benched at another point. Joe Flacco has to start almost, I think, 4.5 games is what he ended up starting. And you go through all of that, and then to look at where the Colts are now. The Colts, this is where they were at Sunday, because this is the offensive rankings for the Colts. And this was kind of crazy because the Colts had an 82% success rate on drives, which doesn't seem real, but you have to remember their time of possession was so low. They only had 8 drives, 20 first downs, which is great, and they earned a 80% drive success rate, which is a top 18% in the league, and 4 red zone trips that all earned points, including 3 touchdowns. Now, it's important to consider the fact that the Colts also had 4 non-scoring drives, and the offense accumulated a total of 2 yards, 2 turnovers, and 0 first downs on those drives. But this is, I think, where it gets important, and this is that here is the ranking for the top 3 offenses of the week, which is the Buffalo Bills, which had a great performance on Sunday night. Then you have the Washington Commanders. I almost said Redskins. How many years has it been since they've been known as the Redskins? And I still almost call them the Washington Redskins. And then it was the Indianapolis Colts, followed by the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But you look at this, and they had a success rate, a drive success rate of 80%, which is followed by, again, the Buffalo Bills and the Washington Commanders. And this is their team points per game was 25, and then here Washington shows 42, and then 35 for the Bills. They had 253 yards, but then there's the important thing is how many drives they have versus, so many other teams had 15, 20, 25 drives, and the Colts only had 8. And so, it's really incredible that they were able to do it. So this is the yards above expected, which was 10.1. Starting field position was 25.9, which is good. The Rams had a 76.9. So all in all, I think this is, again, another thing that the Colts can look to build off of when you're talking about they're not gonna go very far in the playoffs. Let's just be honest. I think they can play spoiler. I think there's a lot of teams in the AFC at this current moment that the Colts could very well play spoiler for. They could play spoiler for the Broncos. They could play spoiler for the Chargers. They could really play spoiler for the Texans. I mean, they've already played spoiler for the Steelers, who, because of their loss to the Colts, are sitting at the 3rd seed, and they could end up dropping further as the season goes on, depending on how the rest of the season plays out for them. They're just now getting into their divisional games. But I mean, this is a team who, if they can sneak their way into the playoffs, I mean, the Broncos have a shot. They're really in contention strictly with the Broncos. It's very unlikely that they're going to be, but it could be the Ravens. The Ravens are 8-5. The Colts are 6-7. So they're 2 games back of the Ravens, 2 games back of the Broncos. If either of those two teams lose 3 games and the Colts win out, I mean, that's 100% chance that the Colts are going to be able to make the playoffs. The Dolphins are pretty much out of it at 5-7. It seems like even though they have the same amount of losses as the Colts, it just seems like their season's over. Tyreek Hill put out a tweet today that really hints that he's going to be retiring. And so you look at the Colts at 6-7. They're sitting currently at the number 8 seed in the AFC. The Colts now have a 25% chance to make the playoffs ahead of the Dolphins, which are 11%, and the 10th seed Bengals at 2%, which is, again, there needs to be a study shown on this Bengals season, who have had one of the best offensive seasons in the history of the NFL and yet have lost so many games. They've lost 8 games, only won 4. But don't be daunted by those odds. The pass for the Colts to make the playoffs for the first time since 2020, which is ridiculous. This is the cleanest route. If they beat Denver, then they would be 1 game better than the Broncos in the final 3 weeks of the season. The final 3 weeks of the season look very, very winnable. This is the New York Giants, who at this point are starting Drew Lock. It could be Tommy DeVito. That's a winnable game. Honestly, their defense is not good enough, I don't think. Then you've got the Tennessee Titans. The Colts have not lost to the Titans in, I think, 4 or 5 straight that they have won against the Titans. And then you got the Jags. And the Colts, this Jags team looks way different than the Jags team that they faced early on in the season. And again, that team didn't have Anthony Richardson playing the way that he's been playing. It had Joe Flacco. And I think that I think the game ended up being 34-31. It was in the 30s. I just don't remember exactly how much it was. But all of the Colts losses this season and all of the Colts wins actually, or no, I'm sorry. Only 2 games that the Indianapolis Colts have played have come down to more than 8 points, which is more than 1 possession, which just goes to show that they've been in it. They've been in it every single time. They've faced very minimal blowouts. And really, I think the game against the Vikings was really one of their worst games that they played. And this defense, when it's on, it's good. But if the Colts beat the Broncos, the Colts would improve to 7-7, and the Broncos would slip to 8-6, meaning Denver would still control its own destiny, but it has a final difficult 3 games looming, which would be the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Chiefs. Now, the Chargers have everything to play for, and the Chiefs likely, they might not have anything to play for at that point. If they've locked in the first seed, they're going to be probably sitting their starters. But the Bengals could really play spoiler, and I think this Bengals team could beat this Denver Broncos team. This is a very young Denver Broncos team that doesn't have a lot of the same experience. But for the Colts, they have the Titans, the Giants, and the Jags. And the division games are tricky, and the Colts already lost to the Jags this season. But it's certainly nothing to take granted for. By the way, we're referencing the article on Stampede Blue if you would like to check that out. You're more than I encourage you to do so. But if the Denver loses any one of its 3 games, the Colts would be in the playoffs if they win out. If Denver were to lose 2 of its last 3 games, the Colts would need to go 2-1 again in the event of a 3-way tie of 9 and 8 teams. The Colts will make the playoffs in every possible scenario. There is, of course, a possibility the Colts win out and miss the playoffs. If the Colts finish 10-7, the Broncos, Chargers, and Ravens still could all finish 11-6. However, if any of those teams and the Dolphins were to finish with a 10-7 record, the Colts would own head-to-head tiebreakers over the Dolphins and the Broncos, and the conference record tiebreakers over the Chargers if the Colts win out. They would have an 8-4 record against AFC opponents. A 10-win Chargers would only have a 7-5 against AFC, while Baltimore would either have a 7-5 or a 6-6 if they were to win 10 games. Now, that's a lot to go over, but I mean, it's also still very possible that the Colts they could very well be the AFC South champions, and we're gonna go over that real quick because I think that's very important, and I think it's a very, 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 very possible thing that the Colts could have. The Colts to break the 3-way or to break the tie of the AFC South, but the Texans, who've lost 3 of their last 5 games, do not have an easy remaining schedule. This is the remaining schedule for the Texans. It is the Dolphins, then the Chiefs, then the Ravens, and then the Titans. So, in all likelihood, Houston's toughest 2-game stretch of the season will come at a 4-day span at Kansas City, and then home against Baltimore on Christmas Day. The Texans might be without Azeez Al-Shaair, who's now suspended for 3 games. And then, I mean, it's entirely possible. This is a Colts team that very well could win out and come off the bye. You've got a lot of guys returning from injury. You've even got guys like Samson Ebukam who could make a playoff run. This is not something to sleep on. I think the Colts, they always win games that they shouldn't win, and they lose games that they should win. So it's very, very possible that the Colts could walk away being AFC South champions, and it all could come on the backs of injuries and suspensions and all of the hullabaloo that this roller coaster season has been. But I think even if the Colts make the playoffs, and even if they miss it, I think this is a potential cornerstone year for this team, and I'm very, very excited at the future of the Indianapolis Colts going forward.